Hi students, sorry for being absent today. I hope that you had been able to make good use of the Padlet activity earlier to get some idea about how climate change affects our environment, be it in terms of flooding or be it in terms of drought. Okay, so you have already learned this previously on the natural variability of climate, the natural causes that impacts our climate, and you also learned about how humans actually change our climate, right? So this part of the chapter focuses on the impact on natural systems and also human systems. So human systems you will learn in 2026. This year you are only learning about the terrestrial environment. Okay, the oceanic environment, this one will leave it for 2026 as well. Okay, so today this was what you had focused on. So looking at this portion over here, let's do some quick check-in. You should receive a handout from your relief teacher and you can use that to guide your learning for today. Okay, so what exactly are natural systems, right? So natural systems are the natural processes that happens on Earth. So in Sec 1, you learn about our atmosphere, our lithosphere, our hydrosphere, as well as our biosphere, right? So these here are all what we consider natural systems. So for this particular topic, you will be learning mainly about the terrestrial systems first, and then you'll be learning about how it affects our aquatic systems as well. You have to realize that for climate change, because even though it happens in our atmosphere, right, it has impacts on the hydrosphere, and because of that it also has impact on our biosphere and our lithosphere as well. Okay, so looking at the video that you saw earlier, you watched this video about the rhinoceros in Assam, India. That was surprising to me because I didn't know that there's this national park in India that plays such a huge role in preserving this particular species. So this was something new for me. Okay, and this was something that I had asked you to read about the impact on the rhinos. Okay, and you were asked to give some comments and do some quick research on this topic. Okay, the next thing that I had asked you to watch was this other video on the impact of the drought on Bakersfield. So for this particular video, you would see that there is widespread loss of animals, like because of the drought, right, because of the lack of water, because of the fall in the water level. So this is also something you can read on, and then you can use the video as well as the worksheet, sorry, the video and the articles that I've uploaded on Padlet to give you a little bit more idea about what had happened if there's a drought. Okay, so this was what you were asked to do, and let's focus a little bit more on the why it happens. Try to link back to what you had learned previously, and then linking it to the impacts itself. So for this kind of questions, right, it's important for you to know why it happens, because this here they may ask you to describe how climate change leads to increase in precipitation and flooding, and basically they're asking for the process, they're asking for the cause. So for this, right, we know that because there is higher global temperature, where we have more solar radiation, more more heat that's absorbed by the land and the oceans, right, and this can result in the air holding more water vapor, because if you remember, warmer air expands, and when warm air expands, remember the beaker, right, so the beaker expands, right, so a beaker becomes bigger. Okay, and when a beaker becomes bigger, it stores more water vapor, and as a result of that, when there's more evaporation, the water vapor increases, right, so the beaker becomes fuller and fuller and fuller. So when the beaker becomes fuller and fuller and fuller, what happens then? If you recall, your RH will become 100%. And when your RH is 100%, that also means that you have more condensation and precipitation. Okay, so linking back to what you had learned previously in topic 1. Okay, so when you have more water vapor in the atmosphere, like I said just now, your beaker is now RH 100%. Okay, that would result in more condensation, and that would result in more rainfall. Okay, so this is the process, some additional explanation here to help you to piece everything together. And as a result of that, right, we have a lot of rainfall. But the thing is that the rainfall also depends on where you are situated on Earth. Some areas will have more rainfall. So for example, places like that already has monsoon, the places that already have very high convectional rainfall, these places will have heavier rainy seasons, which is what we are experiencing at the moment, right? Okay, but in some other places, because the place is very dry to begin with, right, there isn't a lot of there isn't a lot of water vapor to absorb, to evaporate. Okay, so this area here depends on whether this place has large water bodies. But if you are in this place over here that doesn't really have a lot of water bodies to begin with, right, so this place will end up having more intense dry season, longer or more intense dry season. Okay, so let me show you some pictures in a short while. So when you have heavy rainy season, this here, the soil becomes more saturated, a lot more water, the gaps between the soil pores are filled up, so there's limited infiltration, and as a result of that you have higher runoff. Okay, so when there's excessive runoff, of course there's more runoff, and that leads to basically that's flooding. Okay, so this here is a picture to show you how likely, what is the probability of heavy rains. Okay, so I see this less likely for rain, this one here likely will have drought, this here likely will have heavy rain and also eventually lead to flooding. So which are these places? So you see the places that are in dark blue, so some places in Southeast Asia, okay, more rain leading to us, okay, more rain leading to parts of South America, okay, and then here this is the place where they mentioned, right, so the region in Africa. Okay, so let's look at the impact. Okay, so of course when there's flooding, then you have a lot more river overflowing, you have soil erosion, and soil erosion is not good because it washes away the topsoil. Topsoil is the layer of soil on the surface, right, that has the highest amount of nutrients. So topsoil is the most nutritious part of the soil. Why is it most nutritious at the top? Because when there's decomposition, the decomposition happens on the top layer, right? And then that's where the nutrients is. So if you wash away this topsoil and the nutrients are gone, it's not able to have plant growth. Okay, so this will have further implications subsequently. Then we also have landslides also. If you are having higher rainfall at very, very steep slopes, okay, so when these steep slopes are no longer stable, it leads to landslide. Alright, there's this picture in your SLS that is quite helpful. You can refer to this picture, you can take a screenshot if you need to. So this makes it a bit easier for you to see the entire impact on higher rainfall on this location. So this here very important, not in textbook, but in SLS. So you're expected to know this, okay, because it's in SLS. Okay, it's just that it's not in your textbook for some strange reason. Okay, so in your textbook it only mentions the flooding. Alright, so what happens then? Flooding, I think the case study of the rhinoceros is very obvious. It destroys habitats, so plants get uprooted, the species die, they drown, right? And besides that, also take note of this soil fertility part, soil erosion, and then landslide as well. Okay. Alright, so the other on the other spectrum, you have another scenario occurring. Okay, so climate change is quite paradoxical in that in some places it causes an increase in precipitation, but in some places it causes a decrease. So people who don't believe in climate change, right, they will say that I don't believe that there's climate change because in my country I have more flooding. If you say climate change, global warming, then wouldn't it be drier and drier? Why does it cause so much more rain? Because there's so much more rain, I don't believe that climate change is happening. But as geog students, you understand the mechanism. Why is it that when the weather becomes hotter, there's a higher likelihood of rainfall? Okay, so this here is a very important concept that you must be able to tell apart, and you don't be confused by the reasons lah that people who deny climate change will usually share. Okay, so main thing is to remember that for climate change, it's very paradoxical. It can cause more rainfall in some areas depending on what the geography of the place is. It can also cause less rainfall depending on the geography of the place, where if it is a place that is very dry to begin with. Okay, so this here, right, is that yes, one thing that is common is that it causes increased rate of evaporation. But if you are in a place where there is lack of surface water, meaning to say that you have less water available, and as a result of that, you don't have regular replenishing of this surface water, right? Your soil and your vegetation will dry out. So if there's a lack of surface water, there's less available water to evaporate, right? So if there's less water to evaporate, the land becomes drier and drier, and when there's less water to evaporate, your beaker becomes bigger and bigger, warm air expanding, but there's no water. Okay, very little water. So RH is not 100%. RH cannot reach saturation point. So when it is not saturated, there's no condensation. And when there's no condensation, then it will lead to drought. No rain. So this leads to drought. Okay, so this is the issue when it comes to rising global temperatures in places where there's a lack of surface water to begin with. Now, the next thing is, you can see in this picture, these are the places that are at risk of drought when the temperature warms up. Okay, when the temperature comes higher, these are places that are at risk. So you can see for Singapore, there is some risk for us, right? Okay, so when I'm showing you this here, you can see that they are quite different from the content flow from your textbook. So I hope that this helps you to see the connections between the content, because the information put in your textbook may not help you to understand the cause and the impact and the processes so smoothly. So you should still read your textbook, but you can use this to supplement your understanding. Okay, so this is the Sahel region that I mentioned that is very dry because it's desert. Okay, and how it leads to drought, right? So how does a lack of rainfall causes drought? So because there's less rainfall, there's faster evaporation because it's very, very warm. Okay, so it causes the water sources to be depleted. Okay, and in the context of natural system, so this one here must be very focused. If you're talking about natural systems, we're not talking about humans at all. So for natural system, the plants are susceptible because the plants cannot move, right? So unlike animals that can migrate, they can go and find new sources of water, they just wither and die, you know. And for the plants also, because they are dry, they are weakened. You imagine if you're if you have very low immune system, then you're more susceptible to diseases, right? So that can cause them to fall sick easily, and the whole habitat will be destroyed. Okay, so this here also causes the habitat destruction. And another thing is that you must realize that our water cycle, right, not only relies on the evaporation of water. So this part, sorry, let me draw this again. So you have your water body evaporating, contributing to the water cycle. Your plants also contribute to the water cycle, right? And if your plants do not get to transpire because there's less plants die already. So I have even less water vapor in our atmosphere, and that further reduces rainfall. So once the drought process kickstarts, right, it is usually a very long-term process, because you can see that all these things add together, they layer it again and again on top of each other, and that causes the rainfall to drop significantly, and that causes drought to persist. Okay, so another thing is that when the weather is very dry in some areas, some diseases are very common. Okay, so some diseases become easier to spread because the bacteria or even the the viruses can survive better. Okay, so when I'm referring to this botulism and cholera, right, this here don't attack the plants, okay, these attack animals. Okay, so these are diseases that can attack the animals. So the animals also fall sick more easily, and then they die more easily too. So as a result of this, if the animals are able to migrate, they can move, you will see more human animal conflict, okay, because if the animals move to areas that are already occupied by humans, that can cause some stress also. Those who are capable of migration, obviously if it's very warm, they will try to move to places that are cooler. So they either move north or they move south because they want to go to places that are cooler. And we know that for our earth, right, so equator is the warmest part. So as you move south or you move north of the equator, that will cause it to be cooler. Yeah, so they're able to adapt better to the environment. Or another way is they can migrate upslope. So temperature drops when it's at a higher altitude, right? The higher you are, the temperature drops. So they will try to move upwards. But you can imagine moving upwards, there's limited space lah, so there will be a lot more competition. Okay, so these are some examples. I believe they are in your textbook already. So this here especially is what we can see for plants also. So our habitats are changing because our temperatures are becoming warmer and warmer. In the past, this part here is the coldest, but here now the temperature is not as cold as it used to be. This part the temperature is not as cold as it used to be. This part the temperature is not as cold as it used to be because ice caps are melting and so on. So this is a picture you see in your textbook, okay? So you can imagine that when the temperature drops, right, you can see this is the latitude, okay? So we are going from 25 degrees north all the way up to the pole, North Pole. Why North Pole? Because N, okay? So when you go to the North Pole, you can see that by right, we have this kind of habitat. So this is a temperate forest, usually found between here and here. This is the boreal forest found between this latitude to this latitude, and then here is the tundra. Okay, but because of climate change, okay, temperature is increasing. You can see the temperate trees growing into the boreal forest. The boreal forest going into the tundra, mixing with the tundra. And the tundra here eventually also will move upwards. Okay, and that's not good lah because these are habitats. So when you think about plants, always think back, what do they serve? Okay, so they are habitats. So if plants are affected, animals are also affected. These two are interlinked. And of course, plants and animals, they are also interconnected with us. Okay, plus humans also. So don't forget about that. So the impact, what exactly is the impact? So the impact is very firstly, there is the vegetation loss. So vegetation loss was just like what I said just now. If my temperate forest moves, my boreal forest shrinks, for example, there's a loss of habitat, and then my food sources will drop. So if my food sources drop, my less adaptable species that cannot really adapt very well, they have very limited food supply, they only eat a certain species, like pandas only eat one type of food. Yeah, so if you are this kind of species that's not very adaptable, right, then you will extinct, eventually you will go extinct. Okay, so same like for species that are more heat tolerant. Heat tolerant means that you can tolerate high temperature or you're able to migrate. So these are the ones that can conquer other spaces, and they are the ones that can flourish. Okay, so this one here, they are able to go to other places, they are able to adapt. Okay, so not just humans need to adapt to our changing world, our animals and plants also need to adapt, but they don't adapt as fast as humans. So this here can be decline of their species, they can cause extinction or endangerment. Okay, so this is another one that I mentioned just now, limited space. So there's increased competition, they are likely to have a higher rate of extinction. Why? Because if the more adaptable species go into the mountainous area and they compete with the existing species cannot adapt, then they will go extinct. Okay, so very biological. Okay, last part here is, this is for the ecosystem, right? But for our environment, the problem is, like I said just now, once drought starts, if it's not managed well, rain does not come back, it will cause deserts to form. Okay, the land becomes drier and drier, and the land becomes barren and infertile. This just means that it cannot grow plants anymore. And when it cannot grow plants anymore, of course you lose your habitat, right? So this one here cannot grow plants anymore, lose habitat firstly, and it also eventually also affects agriculture, affects the food security. So climate change is really one of the greatest problem mankind is facing at the moment, okay, apart from all the other man-made issues that we see around the world. But climate change is really one that is able to affect different ecosystems on land, in the ocean, and in humans also. So we will learn more about that at the start of next year. Rather depressing start, yes, I agree, but it's also good that we understand how they are interconnected so that we can also make decisions to improve on our choices, you know, how we live our lives, what we buy, what we wear, what we eat, and collectively we should be able to make a difference. Yeah, so if we just give up, right, we have like 8 billion people on earth, but if we don't do anything at all, we'll not be able to overcome this challenge that mankind is facing. Okay, so at this point here, I think that you have seen all these on your A4 paper on your handout. I would like you to convert this into a mind map. Okay, so I am going to try to do this now, and I will also share my version of the mind map with you. So I'd like you to just try on your own first, because by synthesizing all these ideas into a mind map, you can better able to see all the information on one page at one go. Okay, it helps you to crystallize your thinking. All right, so hope this has been helpful. I will do something similar for ocean ecosystems also. All right, you can read ahead if you like to, and I hope that this has been meaningful. Thank you.